is called Labor Law in the Commonwealth Caribbean, the practice of good industrial relations in the 21st century. Chapter 4 of the book deals with layoff in the Commonwealth Caribbean. In that chapter, I have analyzed and looked at layoff in Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Bahamas, I think. When we look at COVID and the global pandemic and how it is affecting business owners, particularly small and medium enterprises, I thought it was very important to discuss layoff without using any sort of legal language. As a matter of fact, most of the book doesn't have much legal language. But to try to explain to anyone who has a small business and doesn't have a business consultant or an IR consultant, what is layoff, what is required. Now in the common law, under common law, you can lay off someone, but you must pay them their wages and their salaries. There is no law in Trinidad, there's no legislation in Trinidad which provides for layoff. What has developed in Trinidad and Tobago over time in industrial relations has been practice and convention. So from the 1930s, I imagine, coming to our era, persons will be laid off, and that has developed over time. Now, layoff clauses are usually found contained in collective agreements. When I was doing the research for the book, I realized that nowadays most collective agreements do not have layoff clauses, and the layoff clauses are contained in some of the older collective agreements. It appears that when the Retrenchment Severance Benefit Act came into force in 1985, that unions and employers began inserting clauses on retrenchment and not layoff. So layoff is not given the kind of prominence it was given before. But of course, no one knew that there would be a pandemic. If there were layoff clauses in most of these collective agreements, it would have been a smoother transition when the pandemic came along. But unfortunately, we do not have many layoff clauses. Now, I looked at layoff clauses in Guyana, and what I discovered is that the Barbados Act is called the Severance Payment Act, Chapter 355A. That act was amended in June 2020 last year to treat with layoff in Barbados, and it has caused parties now it is to deal with severance payments for persons who are laid off. So there is an amendment to this act now, the severance payment, the initial act, and I've included that amendment. It's a temporary, they call it the temporary right to severance payments for layoff or short time, which is very proactive because the Barbados government recognized that layoff would have been a big problem and probably continues so to be. Like I say, Guyana and Jamaica have written legislation on layoff. Trinidad and Tobago does not have written legislation. But we are guided by the principles and practice of good industrial relations, which requires consultation, which requires that there be a definite time, that you don't lay off somebody and not tell them, okay, you lay off for 6 months, you lay off for we normally say 3 months, you lay off for 6 weeks. The layoff requires that you give a definite time. I have included in the book 2 clauses that can guide employers as to how to craft layoff policies and how to craft layoff clauses in their workplace manuals, etc., which I hope will be useful. The layoff clauses, if you have them, will guide what the payment should be. under the common law, you're required to pay the entire salary. In some of the collective agreements, you would see that the parties have negotiated in collective bargaining how much they pay. You know, whether you pay the full salary, whether you pay whatever, that part is for the parties who are involved. But it's for fixed and probable time. Now, retrenchment is the end of it. Retrenchment is, the retrenchment in our act in Trinidad and Tobago is defined as the termination of the employment of a worker at the initiative of the employer. And it is usually, they said it's for reasons for redundancies, usually for economic and financial constraints. And when you retrench the person, that is usually the end of the employment relationship which you shared with that person for whatever period of time. Now, we say that retrenchment is due to at the initiative of the employer, whereas dismissal is due to the fault of the worker. So when there is a retrenchment, our law provides, and the ILO conventions and good industrial relations provides, that you give notice to the persons. You have, first of all, you have consultation, and you speak to the union about what you intend to embark upon. The law requires that you give notice to the worker, the union, the Ministry of Labor. The law has a list of persons that you give notice to. But one of the main requirements is that you look for alternative employment within your organization to avert the retrenchment, to see if there is some other place this person can fit in, because retrenchment is the final chapter of the relationship.